The problem with any series is that often the harder you try to come up with new ideas to keep it going, sometimes you stray off the path chasing an idea and you never look back to see if the new idea doesn't go along with the old idea. That was the fate of Changeling the Dreaming, the fourth book in the World of Darkness series. It's like White Wolf never knew what they wanted with this game. It's been criticized often for being all over the place in theme, adding so much background it eventually becomes a cluttered mess. It's not a bad game. This is still White Wolf when they were at their height. However, it tries to be an upbeat game, in a setting that was the harbinger of the grim dark darkness of the grim dark 90s. It never really fit in with its already established brothers, making Changeling the Dreaming the Zeppo Marx of the World of Darkness. I'm Mr. Welch, and in this Mad Musings, we are openly fey. Changeling hit in 1995, with White Wolf still going strong with the World of Darkness. It was a joint creation, with familiar names like Mark Ryan.Hagen and Sam Chupp, and added Ian Lemke to the design credits, along with Joshua Gabriel Timbrook, who was better known for his art. And looking at his credit on the White Wolf pages, I think he might have been the art director or similar for the project. Second edition followed in 1997, but unlike previous World of Darkness games, there wasn't a third edition, just a 20th anniversary years later. First edition Changeling introduced the base concept, where ancient Arcadia, home of the Fey races, was long closed with humanity turning its back on its imagination, driving the Fey back to their home since they needed mortal imagination to survive. The noble Fey retreated from the world during the Black Plague, leaving the common Fey behind in an increasingly rational world. Then skip ahead to the Summer of Love, when mankind was so inspired by the greatest event in modern history, one so monumental that Bryan Adams even wrote a song about it. When humanity saw, in 1969, that there was so much more they could aspire to be, where everyone could set aside their conflicts and just harmonize together over one single event. I am, of course, talking about Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. What, you thought I was talking about Woodstock? Armstrong and Aldrin walking on the goddamn moon still inspires science fiction writers today, far more than some rainy, oversold concert filled with dirty, dirty hippies. The gates of Arcadia flew open, if just for a moment. Countless noble Fey of every shape and kin went out into the mortal world to try to restore magic and imagination across the globe. They were met by their long-stranded kin who had adopted to the mundane world, even ending the long-standing feud between Seelie and Unseelie. The nobles were not expecting this and demanded to return to the old ways, which caused the commoners to laugh at them. Cue the start of a civil war. Really long story short, a newly discovered Fey acquired the sword Caliburn, signaling by divine providence that he, David, was to carry Caliburn. That's why he was their king. Other claimants to the throne of the Fey court pointed out that this was no basis for a system of government. Still, he was declared king of the Fey and the civil war ended. The core concept of Changeling is that the PCs have a Fey soul in a human body. They are creatures of imagination, and that's what drives their magic. The two game-specific traits in Changeling are glamour, which represents imagination and magic, and banality, which is how much the character is affected by mortal society. Both have advantages and drawbacks. You need glamour to cast your fairy cantrips, but too much glamour risks madness. Banality resists cantrips, making it useful for defense, but it also strips away your Fey half, causing you to become just a regular human. You also have to keep track of your art and your realms, where art is the different types of Fey magic you can use, and realms are what your magic can target. The more points you put in arts gives you more magic, obviously, and the more points in realms lets you increase the number of targets, but also the type of target. The game does strain your XP budget something fierce, so don't say I didn't warn you about that. Using arts is a straightforward system, where the cost and difficulty is determined by several factors. Realms determines if the target is valid. Banality of the target or caster determines the difficulty using whoever has the higher rating. A bunk is then chosen, which is a type of somatic component, which can be anything from dancing a jig to painting the Mona Lisa or another oddly specific action. The more powerful the bunk, the more difficult and time-consuming it becomes. Then adjust the difficulty by spending glamour and roll the dice. It's a multi-step process, but not a difficult one. A funny tidbit about first edition. They produced bunk cards, which you could buy separate from the game, and you needed all of them. But you only needed one of each. You didn't have a need for any duplicates. But because this was right smack in the middle of the CCG rush to capitalize on Magic's emerging dominance, the printer thought the cards were another CCG and printed them in booster packs, rather than a single set of cards, which they were supposed to be. It was an accidental fiasco that caused the cards to be left out of second edition. Speaking of which, like all World of Darkness games, Changeling got a second edition fairly quickly. Unlike other World of Darkness games, it really didn't change much other than a tightening up of the rules and a few rule fixes here and there. The plot didn't change much, nor did any of the Fey get any major tweaks. It was greeted by an explosion of books, as was White Wolf's standard policy at the time. You got the standard faction books, as well as a host of books about fairy culture in different settings. What Changeling did differently from the previous World of Darkness games is they focused heavily on the different types of Fey. And they didn't stop. Where vampire and werewolf might have a dozen or two playable options, Changeling had approximately 70 different options by the time the game had finished. Way more than I can summarize. That was a bit of a base breaker among the fans. Some loved the ridiculous amount of options. Others thought it was overkill and diluted the game. Changeling wasn't well received by a lot of World of Darkness players because on the supernatural badass scale, they were pretty close to the bottom. There were a lot of questions how their magic even interacted with other supernaturals, as the older systems didn't sync well with Changeling. You didn't turn into a Nordic troll combat monster like werewolves could. Other changelings could see your true form, but in order to manifest it, you had to do your bunk, cast your art, and then show off. But the bonus to stats stayed, so a troll with a maxed out strength could bench press a car without using any art. A she with her inhuman appearance level could stun an entire coterie of Toreador vampires just by walking into the room. Crossover games with changelings were a major problem because of the inconsistencies. You've got world-influencing undead immortals, rabid Greenpeace Turbo Ginsu furries, and enlightened masters of reality, plus some guy that can cast minor magic spells as long as he's not too bored. There are 9 starting kin in the main book, with every book after that seemingly adding even more every release. The first one was the Boggin, which resembled short, roly-poly, and friendly people who are good with their hands and a pleasure to be around. They tend to be hired help, and are one of the more numerous commoner fae. Mechanically, they do physical labor at triple speed, can't botch craft rolls, and can determine the social dynamic of any group just by observing them. But they have a very hard time not helping people in need of assistance. This frailty means they get stuck as emergency babysitters quite often. Even the unseelie ones. Ishu are the Wanderers of Changeling. They're always traveling. The thought of settling down in a specific region is alien to them. It makes them hard to use in a city-based campaign, obviously, but for a world-spanning campaign, they're great. Their built-in abilities let them always get to their destination, no matter how hard it is. They gain extra XP when they learn a new tale or perform a great feat, but they can never turn down a challenge or a dare if it's obviously not suicidal. It has been said the only way to keep an Ishu out of a place is to leave the door open with a welcome mat on the ground. Knockers are the cynical yet highly talented craftsmen and inventors of the Changeling. They tend to throw themselves into their work, but are never satisfied no matter how good they are. Others see them as workaholics trying to forget their own failings. They can invent chimerical devices on their own, as long as the methods don't involve modern technology. They can also fix broken devices with the power of profanity, and get a bonus using certain devices as determined at creation. Their one weakness is that every invention they make will have a small irreparable flaw. Even if they score all successes on their rolls, they will still think the device is flawed in a way that only they can see. Pukas have the reputation for being one of the most annoying creatures in all of the World of Darkness. Their stereotype is hypermanic furrykin who are all habitual liars and pranksters. They tend to be cute and love making everyone else look foolish. They also tend to be comedians. Street performers are similar, but most are played just to get on other players' nerves. They rank alongside the Malkavians of the most hated races in the World of Darkness for the same reasons. They can shape change into their animal form, can force people to spill their secrets, and can't botch empathy or subterfuge rolls. On the downside, they can never tell the whole truth unless they spend a point of willpower. If you just want to play a psychopath changeling, there's the Redcaps. These guys are great at murder, that's their shtick. There are Seelie Redcaps, focusing on chivalry and constantly harping about honor, and this gets them killed by the much more common Unseelie variety of Redcap. They can eat anything, even stretching their jaws to devour a corpse. They get all sorts of bonuses to intimidate, but suffer a serious penalty to try any other type of interaction. Satyrs are all about getting laid. Yes, the game says something about they're there to inspire people and to enjoy themselves and help remove their inhibitions, and then talks about how they always wear easily removed clothing, have incredible stamina, and lots of lovers. Also, they rarely shave. Hope you like leg hair, guys. And ladies, prepare to French braid some back hair. It talks about how they also like to be alone and to study by themselves, but also to party and meet new people. That's what the book says. Speaking from experience, I have never met a satyr whose name in Latin didn't translate into hornius doggius. Their abilities include making people pass a willpower check or start bumping ugly. They have extra stamina, a massive bonus to speed, and they can't botch athletic checks. On the other hand, they are creatures of emotions, with wild mood swings, and take a pretty harsh penalty to resist temptation, which actually doesn't come up that much. The She are some of the most important Fae in the storyline, being the former kings and queens of the Fae folk only recently returned. They want to restore the noble houses to how they were, even though the common Fae were doing just fine without them. They are possibly the most stuck-up creatures in all of the World of Darkness, with few rivals from any setting. They only returned with the Apollo mission, so they are newcomers to the world. They are impossibly attractive, getting 2 free points of appearance. When they're angry, they gain bonuses to intimidate, and anyone trying to attack them has to make a difficult willpower check to even be able to swing at them. They can't be made to look foolish by cantrips, and they can't botch etiquette checks. For all those awesome powers, they do have some pretty steep penalties. They gain double banality, which is huge, as you can imagine. They also become depressed quickly, forcing them to change their magic styles frequently to cope. Slua are the lore keepers of the Changeling, with a reputation of being sewer-dwelling loners with no friends. In reality, they love making friends, but they pride themselves on being strange and unusual. Physically, they look like drowned goths with sunken eyes and a putrid smell. The Unseelie like to use the secrets they discover for blackmail, and the Seelie Slua are considered rare, though most Slua don't side with either camp. Slua have the power to dislocate limbs at will, making tying them up almost impossible. They also have greatly heightened senses and can't botch stealth or alertness. Their frailty restricts their speaking voices to barely a whisper, so don't bring any of them to a pep rally. The last of the core kin are the trolls, not the green regenerating monsters from D&D, but the tall Nordic beasts that tower over the other kin. They are warrior knights, bound by honor, slow to anger or to change their mind. They are nobles and are kept in high regard by the other kin, which is a good thing because being on their bad side is considered unhealthy. They get a bonus to strength, and the oldest get another point of strength, though dexterity skills become more difficult. They gain extra health to make them even harder to kill. They get 2 extra dice to resist temptation and can't botch athletics or alertness. They must fulfill any oath they make, or they lose their bonus to strength and wounds until they redeem themselves. And if they are betrayed, they have a bad habit of flying into a rage, which counts as being on their bad side. The 20th anniversary tried to make the setting darker, but it still has the problem with the Fae really aren't well defined. The danger of banality is increased, but the game still comes across as half-mad people that can see other half-mad people and cast spells at them, but don't impact the rest of the world. Vampires want to control society. Werewolves want to destroy threats to the world. Mages want to reshape reality. What do changelings want? To inspire imagination? It's a great goal, but the game doesn't reflect that in the rules. It's peanuts compared to the scale of the previous games, and it's rather poorly explained. As a standalone game, Changeling is fine. You don't have to make the entire setting all doom and gloom, just run the game without all the other supernatural elements or use them sparingly. They don't fit in too well with crossovers anyways, as everybody else does what the Changelings do, just better. Trolls have to use glamour to go full beast modes. Werewolves do it automatically. Want to cast a powerful spell? Then get ready to spin plates on a stick while a mage does it with a snap of his fingers. That's where a major source of the dislike of the game comes from. You've got 3 classic settings before Changeling, and then you get a game that doesn't seem to know who it is. The World of Darkness fanbase is still torn on Changeling. It's been said that Changeling the Dreaming and Changeling the Lost could switch their universes, and both would be improved by that. If you want to get the game, it's not hard to find. There's PDFs on all the major websites. POD is available for most of the books, and to be honest, the books don't sell for a lot on secondhand websites. There's a lot of books, however. Collecting an entire set is going to be expensive just from the volume alone. If you're a completionist, you're going to have an easy time of finding the books, but getting them all is going to be time-consuming. That's it for Changeling the Dreaming. It would have been a nice standalone, but the World of Darkness doesn't do standalones. The power gamers found the races in it weak, but the people that just wanted to play the Fae and their human guises didn't want to include the other races because how banality worked with most of them. The sheer number of Fae introduced into the myriad of source books was either a dream come true for people that wanted options, or way too many for people already on the fence. New players don't want 70 options when trying to make a character. Don't bother trying to explain them all. I didn't time this next review because of all the sudden drama regarding Games Workshop. It was already the next game on the list. Next Mad Musings is going to be Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, one of the most popular alternatives to D&D, and the fan base is just as rabid today as it was back then, complete with hate towards the company that gave them the setting, the clone that seems to hate its own source material, and of course the previous edition. Until next time, if your child has needle-like teeth, a blood-soaked blankie, and yellow eyes the size of a saucer, they might be a changeling.